it took me a while to realize that what vegetable oils do by building up in our body fat this way, they are essentially creating body fat that we can build, but we can't burn it off. Not without endangering ourselves, because your immune system is so confused by all this oxidative stress. It's like smoke and fog clouding its ability to sense what's going on in the environment, that the white blood cells in your immune system start attacking your own body tissues. That's what autoimmune disease is.
Cate Shanahan, MD, is a Cornell-trained physician scientist whose work has inspired entire movements that have changed our popular food culture. She's a New York Times bestselling author and has worked directly with the Los Angeles Lakers, creating the Pro Nutrition Program. Her work has been emulated by countless championship teams all around the world. All right, I've got one of my favorite people in the world of health and wellness, Dr. Cate Shanahan. And you've got an incredible new project that I got my hands on early. Of course, Dark Calories. This book is an absolute game changer. And you drop so many different nuggets in this book. I can't wait to dive into this. But one of them, just really kicking the book off, you shared just how much of this newly invented substance is in the average person's diet today. Let's talk a little bit about that.
Most people have no idea that 30% of their average daily calories are coming from this collection of vegetable oils that I call the hateful 8 oils. 30% of their calories, you could also look at it as 80% of their fat calories. So like most of the fat that you ingest is not natural fat. It's factory derived oils. And these oils are not they're not really fit for human consumption, and they are the worst thing in the food supply. And that's why I wanted to write an entire book called Dark Calories, focusing on just how many different ways they're messing us up. And the whole book, this is a new book. I've written about other ways they're messing up in other books. So it's just a very huge Pandora's box that the medical community knows nothing about. So I'm opening it to expose it to the world.
Yeah, and the way that you lay this out, this is a huge, huge part of these multiple health epidemics that we're now experiencing. We're going to unpack why that is. But this is really the definitive guide on this subject matter, because I know that there are a lot of so-called, nutrition experts, and we know about the funding issues and things like that are saying, hey, you know what, all this stuff about vegetable oils, it's not justified in the data. It's fear mongering. Well, as a matter of fact, and this is one of the other statistics that you share with us, is that, we have in our culture today, the majority of our diet, the average American, is now ultra-processed foods. So these are newly invented foods in general. According to the BMJ, 60% of the average American adult's diet is ultra-processed food. For kids, according to JAMA, it's 67.5% of our children's diet today is ultra-processed food. And you share that 80% of these foods that have ingredient labels on them have some form of vegetable oil. Again, a newly invented substance. And I love, let's talk a little bit about how vegetable oil is made compared to some of the oils that have been used for thousands of years.
So vegetable oil is radically different than anything else humans have ever consumed in history, because once you extract the oil from the vegetable oils, the hateful 8, it is so inedible. It stinks. If you were to get some fumes up in your nose would burn. It would burn your eyes. They would start tearing. And if you were forced at gunpoint maybe to take a swig of the crude vegetable oil, like soy oil or crude corn oil, it would burn your mouth, it would burn your esophagus, and it would burn your stomach. And probably you would just regurgitate it immediately, because your stomach would recognize it as something that should not be there. And, hopefully it would expel it from your body. That's the crude oil. And then it gets refined, extensively refined in factories, requiring many, many complex steps and chemical reactions. And the names of the steps are degumming, dewaxing, deodorizing, bleaching, washing often is necessary to remove some solvents that are often removed. And so there's nothing else in our food supply that, like, the raw material of it is so toxic that it's considered inedible, that it requires basically extensive cleanup, the equivalent kind of factory setup to what you see for crude motor oil, like crude petroleum oil. It's very similar processes that make it, in the end, something that is at least edible, but it is not safe for human consumption. It's only been grandfathered in because it was first released into the food supply over 100 years ago. And you have to realize that at that point in time, there were zero food safety standards. At that point in time, in the early 1900s, people could sell milk that was laced with borax, because borax, a toxin, a bleaching agent, would lighten it up, because if milk had gotten a little bit rotten or some weird like poop from the cows was in there, it would lighten up the color, right? So it looked better. So that was allowed back in the day, and since these oils were invented so long ago, they just got grandfathered in. Nobody required any sort of safety testing. And so that's kind of a key difference. There's nothing else in our food supply that is a main ingredient that you can say that about.
Wow. What's so crazy is that you said crude oil, right? And so when we think of a term like that, we think about the oil industry. And it's actually very similar in how these oils are getting produced. And you share in the book, and this is really important, you note that the vegetable oil, like the seeds themselves, which, can you talk a little bit about that distinction about, quote, vegetable oil and seed oil? But you share that vegetable oil, it's not necessarily the seeds that are toxic themselves, but the process of oxidation that happens creating these seed oils that are incredibly toxic for humans.
Yeah, so there's some of this processes are important to understand. Some of this sounds like jargon, but it is actually crucially important to understand. And the key piece of jargon is the word you already said, oxidation. And so the first thing you brought up was, okay, what's the difference between vegetable oil and these oils that I'm talking about? Like, how does a person know? So vegetable oil is an industry term. It's an umbrella term for any oil that's not from an animal. It was originally created also in the late 1800s to distinguish the oils that were that didn't come from whale oil from these newer oils that were being manufactured, like cottonseed oil. That was really the main one, cottonseed oil, back in the day. So, and there was a little bit of palm oil. There was also coconut oil back in the day, but it was the term vegetable oil is an umbrella term that you can't use to determine whether or not something is healthy, because it includes healthy oils like olive and like coconut, and it includes what I call the hateful eight, which are toxic. So I'll just real quickly list them off before I talk about how they got onto the list. So there's 3 C's, corn, canola, cottonseed, 3 S's, soy, sunflower, safflower, and then 2 more, rice bran and grapeseed oil. So there's 8 of them. Now, if you live in, or if you live outside of North America, you don't know what canola oil is. They don't call it that there. They call it rapeseed oil. They're the same thing. And when you look on if you see the words vegetable oil, though, on the ingredients list, that's a key that you need to read what comes next, because very often it is a member of the hateful eight. But it's not totally synonymous with the hateful eight, like I said. So how did these guys make the list? How did the hateful eight seed oils become, graduate to the level of the worst thing, that what Dr. Cate says is the worst thing in the food supply? Well, it has to do with their chemistry, and they're uniquely unsuitable for processing, yet we have to we process them to create them. That's why we create this nasty crude oil. And they're uniquely unsuitable, partly because of their fatty acid chemical composition. They're full of polyunsaturated fatty acids, which just are very volatile compared to the more traditional fat fatty acids that people used to eat, like the saturated fatty acids and the monounsaturated fatty acids that foods like butter and olive oil and coconut and the traditional healthy fats are rich in those types of fatty acids. So the seed oils are really high in these polyunsaturates and they oxidize, and that's when all heck breaks loose in the whole creation of these oils in our food supply, because polyunsaturates plus oxygen, they react together, and that breaks down the polyunsaturates and develops into toxins. And that doesn't happen when you just have a piece of corn, corn on the cob that you want to eat. There's nothing like that going on. And the same you can say about the sunflower seeds and the soybeans. Cottonseed oil we don't eat, so we don't have to worry about that one. Grapeseed oil, we also don't, we don't eat grape seeds. But, so the ones that we would eat, they're fine in the form of whole foods. So that's a really important question, because a lot of people do worry, well, gosh, if these seeds, if soy has so many polyunsaturates, doesn't that mean it's going to be bad for me? And the answer is no, because nature takes care of its own polyunsaturates. It's got a whole boatload of protective chemicals that we call antioxidants. And that's how it's not at all harmful when we eat soybeans in terms of oxidation and toxicity.
And we're going to put up an image from your book that demonstrates how these polyunsaturated bonds are getting oxidized, right? So demonstrating these double bonds. So poly means many. So it has a lot of these double bonds that are easily oxidized. And if you could, can you talk a little bit about, because I think when people think about an oil being healthy to cook with, the term smoke point comes up. Can you talk about smoke point and why that's probably not as good a measurement tool as we might think it is?
Smoke point is absolutely worthless in terms of health. I believe that actually smoke point is just a term used by the edible oil industry to sell their oils to restaurants, because a busy restaurant wants to be able to do everything fast. And that means high temperature, and that usually means a deep fryer. So if you're setting your deep fryer at 400 or above, you do need an oil that has a high smoke point. But for everyone else in the world, we do not. For every other cooking application, whatever you're doing, you do not need a high smoke point oil, period. And let's talk about how do you make an oil into a high smoke point oil, because I think that'll really bring a lot of clarity. You can actually raise the smoke point of an oil or a fat by refining it. And refining it strips away the things that will make it smoke. It strips away the free fatty acids, it strips away proteins. But refining also makes it less nutritious because it strips away many of the vitamins and all of the minerals. And all of the hateful eight oils are refined. Like a refined oil is not a better quality oil. A refined oil is an oil that the crude oil, is the hateful eight. If we're talking about the hateful eight, the crude oil is inedible, remember? So you have to refine the hateful eight for them to become edible. Now, what about olive oil? Olive oil, you don't have to refine it for it to be edible. In fact, the best, everyone knows, the best olive oil is the virgin olive oil. What does virgin mean? It means unrefined. So if you get refined olive oil, it's a lower quality, it's cheaper. And how does the smoke point of refined olive oil compare to the smoke point of unrefined olive oil? Well, it's higher. So unrefined olive oil has a smoke point between 350 and around 400, depending on exactly which olive oil you're talking about. It's always a range, which brand. It depends on variables that will vary with the nature of the olives, frankly, right? So it's not for anyone to say, oh, this oil has a smoke point of exactly this, that is inaccurate. They're only talking about one specific brand or one specific test. So the smoke point of virgin olive oil, unrefined, is somewhere between 350 and 400. The smoke point of refined olive oil is higher. It's somewhere between 380 and 450. So the smoke point of, what's the smoke point of canola oil? Canola oil is one of these oils that they sell as high smoke point oil. Well, it's lower than refined olive oil. So there's just lies and lies about this concept of smoke point. So one of them is the fact that it's a set number, like we just talked about. And the other one is the idea that it's making to use a low smoke point oil is going to make your oil somehow deteriorate while you're cooking. So I want to talk about that too. Like, people worry that if they don't use a high smoke point oil, there's something going to happen chemically with their food that's going to be, make it taste bad or make it bad for you. And that is absolutely not true, because what's going to happen is you stir your food, right? We never eat food that has been cooked to an internal temperature of 350 degrees. We very rarely do. We certainly don't do that with with any meats and most vegetables, because they would be incinerated at that temperature. So we don't need that temperature. We don't need to have our food get up to 350 degrees. So we don't even need that high temperature for most of our cooking applications. So again, it's just a false idea. And what happens that has nothing to do with smoke, like the reason these vegetable oils, the hateful eight, are toxic has nothing to do with their smoke point. It has to do with the fact that the polyunsaturates deteriorate invisibly as they react with oxygen. And that can occur at much lower temperatures. It has nothing to do with the smoke point. So the smoke point is really, truly only relevant if you're, in a busy restaurant, you want to set that deep fryer at 400 or higher and forget about it for days.
So the smoke point is smoke and mirrors.
I love it.
All right. We're going to have some corny jokes here on this episode because I'm with my friend, Dr. Cate Shanahan. And you've got some Easter egg little jokes in the book, by the way. Like we shared before we got started, there's a little Ghostbusters reference in there. But, when I think about the smoke point, for example, I think about the experience of cooking and the smells, and also how, like you mentioned, back in the day, adding borax to milk, like we could smell the milk and to know if it's gone bad, or just so many different things in nature. Our sense of smell is like humans have a very highly sophisticated sense of smell. And that's really the major factor in our wide palate, like our ability to sense so many different flavor sensations as well, is because of our very immaculate sense of smell. Now, when we hear something like that, we might compare ourselves to another species. Like, we can't smell the guy at the airport with the bag of cocaine. We're not dogs, but their noses are specialized for different things. Our noses are specialized for sensing food quality. All right. Now we have a sense of smell that can really help to warn us about potential toxins in our food. But in the book you shared, unfortunately, we can't count on our sense of smell when it comes to vegetable oils. Why is that?
We can't count on our sense of smell when it comes to vegetable oils, mainly because these toxins that develop in vegetable oils are not present in nature. So we just never had a need to evolve the ability to detect them. The vast majority of the toxins are not present in food that the way that we used to cook it, right? We used to throw food into a fire. We did not have this high heat. We did not use these types of oils. So we were never exposed to these kinds of chemicals before. And that's, long and short of it, why we don't really smell things like cocaine, or, we don't even smell granulated sugar, right? Our sense of smell is about biology. So our sense of smell guides us to nutritious foods. And another thing it does is warn us about hazards in the environment. But back in the day, most of the hazards in the environment were infectious diseases. So, we would catch something from somebody. So our sense of smell is attuned to be disgusted by the certain smells that indicate somebody's got a festering wound with a bacteria that could be highly dangerous or highly contagious, or that they're just infected with something, right? These festering wounds are some of the most vile and repulsive smells. And that is the main sort of toxin that our noses are really good and attuned for detecting. But these chemicals that didn't exist before, they're new. So our noses do not know what to do with them. They don't recognize them. It's a whole new thing. I don't know if even dogs can smell them, but that would be an interesting study to do.
Shout out to Scooby-Doo. All right. Where are you? All right. Now, here's where this gets really interesting, but also alarming. And I cited this in one of my previous books. And also, you have so many different references in this book. I want people to understand this. You are the most researched and you are the leading authority on planet Earth in this subject matter. Period. End of story. You've got just over the years, and you got all the studies out there for us on different posts, just sharing all these references and going and doing this hard work to find this data, because what you shared, and I actually shared this with a friend of mine after reading your book, a lot of this data isn't in accessible peer-reviewed journals, that the average person is just looking up, but this data has been there for a very, very long time. But one of the studies that I referenced, and I also, of course, referenced you, and you even supported me in the creation of this book, and Eat Smarter, sharing a blurb for the book, and I appreciate that. Your endorsement means so much. But I shared a study that was published in the journal Inhalation Toxicology. So it's a journal dedicated to inhalation potential hazards for humans. And the researchers found that even smelling vegetable oil during the process of cooking can damage human DNA. Just smelling it, right? And the thing is, we're often completely unaware that this is taking place, and this throws me back to my time being a teenager and working at McDonald's, as my first job, and just all that grease in the air, and just we have no idea that inhaling this stuff is changing what's happening with our biology.
Yeah, there's been a few studies now that have shown that when people who work over a deep fryer, or even people who cook a lot in their home kitchens over a frying pan, when they're using these vegetable oils, they're inhaling volatile chemicals. Volatile just means that they come out of the pan in the form of gas. We can't see them, and our nose cannot detect most of them. And continual exposure to those is causing lung cancer in non-smoking people. And it's such a problem that the industry is, looking into ways to mitigate that. And of course, the easiest way to mitigate that would be to stop using these vegetable oils. But, the doctors' associations that are guiding what the regulatory agencies believe, the doctors' organizations are saying that you can't use the more stable saturated fats. So it's a battle of what is the restaurant industry, what they can do is limited by what the health authorities let them do. And because the health authorities have this belief that these oils are the healthy types of fats, that's where we're at a serious loggerheads here. We've got even people within the vegetable oil industry that I spoke to, that I interviewed for this book, saying that, yeah, we would love to switch out the deep fryers. We'd love to get rid of the vegetable oil, especially in the deep fryers, because it is less stable. And we cannot make this oil safer than we already have. We just can't control all of those oxidation reactions. We cannot stop the toxins from forming. And they've said, I spoke to one who I cite in the book, his name is Dr. Decker. He said that it's not up to the edible oil industry what they do. That's where I learned that the problem is not the restaurant industry. It's not the vegetable oil industry. The problem is the medical associations that have this belief that polyunsaturated fatty acids are the healthy kind and that saturated fatty acids are not. And so these folks who the medical industry now is controlling so much of what is available in our food supply. They're controlling what we grow, not just in this country, but globally. So the medical industry has reshaped our food supply with this one belief that polyunsaturated fats are the healthy kind. And that's a chemical term that they're talking about and they're relying on, and they don't know about the truth about oxidation. And so that's why I think it's really important for people to understand just a few of these technical terms so they can go through life understanding the truth about the vast majority of what's out there in our food supply. And I think that's absolutely important for our health.
Yeah. And in the book, you share some wonderful visual illustrations. And again, thanks to you, we'll be able to share some of these on the video version of this episode. But just seeing this direct correlation with as our consumption of these oils has increased and seeing widespread increases in a variety of chronic illnesses, in particular, heart disease and obesity. And in the book, you share that all chronic diseases share the same root cause, which is oxidative stress. And there's a direct quote from the book. You say that vegetable oil, being both toxic and nutritionally poor, is oxidative stress in a bottle. All right, talk about this oxidative stress connection, the vegetable oil connection, and our epidemics of chronic disease.
Yeah, so oxidative stress, that's one of those words that's abstract. It sounds like jargon. How can you possibly understand it? Well, it's the main thing that you need to know. The only thing that you need to know, it's really quite simple, actually. It's a form of chemical chaos. And if you've heard of radiation and you know radiation is bad, well, radiation is bad because it's high energy particles and they can penetrate our bodies and they can wreak havoc within our cells at that molecular level. They are high. Radiation is a high energy particle that just, when it hits the molecules in our cell, it explodes them. And radiation causes oxidative stress. Smoking causes oxidative stress. So a lot of these things that we know that are bad for us cause oxidative stress. Lack of exercise can cause oxidative stress. Lack of sleep can cause oxidative stress. And oxidative stress is a state that is incompatible with normal function of a cell. So let's think about what is a cell. A cell is like a little balloon of chemicals, and the outer layer of the cell, like a balloon, is flexible. It's called the membrane. It's made out of chemicals. And inside the cell, different from a balloon, there's so much activity going on. It's like a little city in there. And all of it is run by chemicals. The chemicals build little roads inside the cell, and then they break down the roads. And those roads, what are they for? They're to transport things here and there inside the cell, just like roads that we build. And just like our own cities, the cell has its like little center of the rules, right, which are all run by the nucleus where our DNA and our genes are, and that's kind of like the brains of the operation. So cells are bags of chemicals that must contain the right chemicals and must not contain the wrong ones, because when they contain the wrong ones, one really bad thing happens. That's oxidative stress. That is what kills us ultimately. And in Dark Calories, I tell the story of the man that discovered that. The man that discovered how oxidative stress kills us, his name was Denham Harmon, and he was a chemist, and he was just fascinated with, like, why do we die? This was in the 1950s, and nobody had any clue. No one could answer that. So he went to medical school to answer it. And after he graduated from medical school, he learned all kinds of cool stuff about the cell. So he realized that, well, gosh, death must begin inside the cell, because if all of your cells are healthy, then by definition, your whole body must be healthy. So death begins in the cell, he decided. That was his first big breakthrough revelation. But he wasn't done. He wasn't done making big breakthrough revelations for the field of medicine. He was like a theoretical biologist. You know how there's theoretical physicists like Stephen Hawking that discover how, they put the thoughts on a blackboard and try to figure out how very complex things happen. And then the experimental physicists test their ideas. Well, so this Denham Harmon, his next big theory was the biggest breakthrough of all. And that was what kills our cells is free radicals. And what do free radicals come from? Oxidative stress. And what do they cause? Oxidative stress. So it's like a forest fire that shoots embers up in the air, and those embers can spread the fire. It's a very quick and very dangerous process, very destructive, just like a wildfire. So oxidative stress is like this wildfire being released inside your cells, and that is the root cause. We now know oxidative stress is the root cause of every single disease. When Denham Harmon first published his breakthrough paper about the root cause of death back in the 1950s, we didn't really, actually at first everybody rejected the idea because it was a brand new idea, and that's just how science is. Everybody attacks it and tries to poke holes in it, but they couldn't. So it withstood, some serious attack. And then it was finally accepted. And then pathologists the pathologists are the types of doctors that look for the root cause of diseases like Alzheimer's, like heart attacks. So pathologists started looking for signs of oxidative stress once this theory got out. And they found it everywhere. They found it in every disease. They found that every disease, no matter what, whether it's in your brain or in your heart, in your kidneys, in your skin, in your reproductive organs, in your muscles themselves, every disease of every organ and tissue type, they found signs of oxidative stress in there. And so that's why I can say with assuredness that any chemical, anything in our diet that promotes oxidative stress is terribly harmful for us. And even though medical science hasn't quite made that connection, or is a long way from making that connection, that is the answer. That is the answer to all these mysterious diseases that everyone, if anyone has been unlucky enough to be diagnosed with a chronic disease, it's coming from oxidative stress.
Yeah. And what we should be asking, what is subjecting us to more oxidative stress, and looking at the very ingredients that make up our cells. And I love how you talk about in the book that we need some polyunsaturated fats, right? Some of these PUFAs, right? We need some of these in our diet. They help to build our tissues. But the sheer amount that's in our diet now that's making up our tissues the last few decades is changing us as a species. The ingredients that make up the average human has changed. And this was highlighted in the Elgin Project that you shared in the book. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the Elgin Project, I think, I don't even know how to pronounce it. It could be Elgin.
I knew a guy named Elgin in high school, so as I went with that.
So let's say Elgin. It was a project that was carried out in the 1950s where folks were trying to determine our requirement of vitamin E. They did a lot of really important basic studies like this many, many decades ago. How much vitamin E do we need in the human diet? And so folks back then, they did know that the corn oil and the soy oil that was at that point in time being released in the food supply was more likely to oxidize, and it might impact our need for antioxidants. And vitamin E is one of the most important antioxidants because it sits in our cell membranes and it protects those fragile polyunsaturated fatty acids from oxygen attack, from free radicals, as it sits in our cell membranes. So every single one of our cell membranes needs to just be loaded with vitamin E. And so this was known. So they did a study and they compared a diet that was high in corn oil with a diet that was low in corn oil and high in more traditional fats like lard, and they even had some margarine and stuff in there. Not particularly healthy, but it's at least those trans fats and margarine are not so easily oxidized as the fatty acids in vegetable oil. So they tested their vitamin E. They followed these folks for a long time because these sorts of studies cannot be done in a few weeks. That's a major flaw with the vast majority of the research in this area now. Back in the day, the scientists were more knowledgeable about basic stuff like oxygen and oxygen reactions. We lost some of that knowledge in medicine. But so they studied these two different groups of people for several years, and they found that after about 3-4 years, given the same amount of vitamin E in the diets, right? Their diets were, they made sure that they had the same amount of vitamin E in the diets. The people on the corn oil, their vitamin E levels suddenly started to drop. And they concluded that what happened was just all of those polyunsaturated fatty acids eventually just depleted the ability of the body to keep the polyunsaturated fatty acids safe. And oxidative stress took over and depleted the vitamin E. And that's a very, very important concept. There was so much that came out of that study, that series of studies actually, that medical science ignores. So we don't know that in order to do a study to see what are the health effects of soy oil versus butter or lard or traditional fats, doctors today do not know that you have to do your study for at least 3-4 years. And actually at the conclusion of one of the studies, they found an increased rate of cancer developing starting beginning at the 5-year point. So they said that you really need to do it for at least 5 years if you want to start to see some of these more like complex effects, right? Cancer is a lot more complex than your vitamin E level. So, but that information is lost on medical science today. And not one single study that I've seen that debunks the idea that seed oils are unhealthy goes on long enough to do that. That's been done in the past 20 years.
So we're seeing this phenomenon take place. We know that antioxidants, which have been all the rage for the last, we'll say 20 years, people have really known about the benefits of antioxidants, at least superficially. But whether it's dietarily taken in antioxidants or the ones that we produce within our own bodies, our ability to utilize, to store, produce, to utilize antioxidants goes down precipitously to stop oxidation when we're consuming these vegetable oils over long periods of time. So again, please hear this. Your body's ability to utilize antioxidants to reduce oxidation, we'll just call it premature aging and death. Your body's ability to utilize antioxidants goes down dramatically when consuming vegetable oils. And also, you note how the actual constitution, the actual makeup of human fat cells changed significantly over, I think it was a couple of decades time span, and what is making up the human fat cell. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so vegetable oil is not just oxidation in a bottle. Since oxidation brings about accelerated aging, you can really look at vegetable oil as accelerated aging and decrepitude in a bottle. It is shortening our lifespans. It's shortening our life potential, and we're seeing that actually in the statistics. We're seeing that the generation born in the year 2000 has a significantly shorter average life expectancy than their parents. By 6 years now. So, it's quite a tragedy that's unfolding before this. And it is happening because of what you touched on there was that our body chemistry is changing, right? For such a profound thing to happen, that our life expectancy has been shortened. We're actually finding that people's growth expectancy is also shortened by something like 2 to 3 inches. We are profoundly changing the chemistry of the human body. And one way vegetable oil does that is by the oxidative stress that it promotes. But a whole other thing that it does to us, there's a whole other thing that it does. It reformulates our body fat. the fat that sits under our skin, is not supposed to have so much polyunsaturated fatty acids in it. It's supposed to be maybe around like less than 5% of it should be polyunsaturates. And these days, adipose biopsies are showing it's as high as 30%. And in infants fed on formula that's made out of soy or corn oil, it's as high as 40%, which is this is an astronomical change in our body fat. But what does that mean? Like, what does that really mean? Well, what I've concluded, this has taken me a while to figure this out, Shawn, right? Like, I've been talking about vegetable oils actually since my first book, which came out in 2009, but it's took me a while to realize that what vegetable oils do by building up in our body fat this way is they are essentially creating body fat that we can build, but we can't burn it off. Not easily, not without endangering ourselves. And I think this is why we're seeing that rapid weight loss, that people who, do rapid weight loss, they regain it really quickly because first of all, they're not improving their health. They're not improving their metabolic health. But what they're doing is they're forcing their body to burn fat that the body's cells really cannot burn without suffering damage. And this is why we find that people who've yo-yo dieted, meaning they've lost a whole bunch of weight, no matter how many times they've gone on a diet, they keep regaining it back. Well, people who've done that a bunch of times are far more metabolically damaged and far less healthy than people who, of the same weight who never lost it like that. And it comes down to the damage that we do to our bodies when we force ourselves to burn off this inflammatory polyunsaturated fat that is reformulated by vegetable oil.
This is a revolutionary insight. Obviously, obesity is one of the kind of hallmark epidemics of our time right now. And, being in this field for so long, there's this unfortunate belief that, people they're just too lazy. They don't want to do stuff. They don't want to work hard, whatever the case might be. And I was even taught this in different ways in my university setting, but I have not met one person who doesn't want to be healthy. They might have stories about why they can't have that, but if they had a choice, they would be healthy. They would have the body and health and fitness that they want. But what's really happening is we're being poisoned. We're poisoning ourselves as a species and building our bodies out of these newly invented chemicals that are very similar, like the PUFAs, as you noted in the book, that are in these vegetable oils are very similar to that. The chemistry is identical to that which makes up our cells, in particular our cell membranes. And so that integration and the inherent volatility of these things, and if we're, quote, burning fat and breaking this stuff down, we're just flooding our body with all these toxins. And guess what's going to happen, right? Our liver is going to revolt. Our thyroid is going to revolt. Our entire endocrine system, our brain is going to revolt. Our our bodies. You can just go through the list. Our bodies are making adaptations to being poisoned. And one of the things that you shared in the book, and this was a result of 46 studies, and this was between 1959 and 2008, 46 studies. And this was all conducted in this meta-analysis. And the researcher was looking at, and this was very hard for them to put together, to sift through and find this data. But biopsy results showed that the portion of polyunsaturated fatty acids in human body fat gradually increased from just 9.1% of all fatty acids to 21.5% during roughly 50 years. That was just in 50 years. As you know, they could be up to 30%. So we're looking at a situation where more than doubling of the tissues that make up our bodies, our body fat, is made of this new substance. And it's changing the ingredients that make us up. And this leads to my next question in this important topic, because thankfully, this is being talked about in the health space and conventional medicine in a major way right now. Inflammation, right? This seemed kind of this it seemed very superficial at one point. It's just, ooh, it's inflammation. But because if we didn't see something that was inflamed, like superficially, like from an injury or something of that nature, maybe even an infection, seeing symptoms, we would neglect to understand that inflammation can happen chronically, systemically in all these different parts of our bodies. And this is a root of a lot of disease. So can you talk about specifically how oxidative stress triggers inflammation?
Oxidative stress triggers inflammation because it is generally a warning sign to the cell of trauma or infection, right? So when we like cut ourselves, or if there's invasive bacteria, those injuries, those insults trigger oxidation of the polyunsaturated fatty acids in our cell membranes. Those polyunsaturated fatty acids that sit in our cell membranes that are supposed to be there, they're there like as for a variety of reasons. And one of them is to be like nature's tripwire that, oops, there's an invader, or oops, there's something dangerous happening here. We got to release the inflammatory crew to make the blood clot so we don't bleed to death, to bring up the white blood cells so that they can fight the infection. All of that reaction is designed to stop you from bleeding to death and stop you from dying of an infection. Those are or even if like the other thing in nature that people used to have to deal with was envenomations, like from snake bites and stuff like that. It hugely triggers the inflammatory response. And the oxidation of the polyunsaturates is the very tripwire. So once we've been eating vegetable oils and we've depleted our body of the antioxidants that we need to control those reactions so that we can shut down inflammation, then we're subject to more and more inflammation, right? We can't shut it down easily. So this is why, for example, like maybe a real simple to understand, if you are more prone to inflammation, if you've been eating a lot of seed oils, you've depleted your antioxidants, if you sprain your ankle, it's going to swell up like a balloon, and it's going to stay swollen a lot longer than if you are able to control inflammation in your body. If you have more antioxidants, you haven't been eating seed oils. Same with if you get a flu or a cold. You're much more likely to have a very severe stuffy nose. You might get a sinus infection. There's so much inflammation in your sinuses. It might just take forever to go away. It might be weeks. You might be back in the doctor's office every few weeks getting different antibiotics. Those things don't shut down the inflammatory response. They just help kill some of the bacteria that might be contributing to it a little bit. But the main contributing factor is oxidative stress that makes the inflammation that has gotten triggered impossible, very, very difficult to control. And so if that happens in the lungs, people get asthma attacks, right? And this was why I was on Bill Maher during COVID, because if you have a more severe systemic viral infection, you can get such severe inflammation in your lungs that they fill up with fluid and you suffocate and die. And that's what was happening to people during COVID. And, medical science couldn't really explain why seemingly young, healthy people were experiencing these very severe pneumonias, these near-death experiences, and some unfortunately did die. And of course, obesity was a risk factor and hypertension was a risk factor. But obesity and hypertension are biomarkers for your body is suffering from too much oxidative stress, and you're prone to these extreme inflammatory reactions. And that is the root cause of so many conditions that medical science doesn't have a good explanation for. And we have to treat like repeatedly with drugs, whether some of the more common are the rheumatoid problems, right? People get rheumatoid arthritis, they get lupus. Those are inflammatory problems, and we have to treat those with steroid drugs or other drugs that suppress the inflammatory response, that suppress our immune system. Why? Because we have so much oxidation in our body that we can't shut off the immune system when we need to. And the immune system starts going and making big mistakes when you have something like celiac disease or thyroiditis, your immune system is attacking your gut or your thyroid because your immune system is so confused by all this oxidative stress. It's like smoke and fog, clouding its ability to sense what's going on in the environment, that the white blood cells in your immune system start attacking your own body tissues. That's what autoimmune disease is.
I hope everybody's seeing this Madam Web connection to vegetable oils with so many different issues. And I'm so glad that you brought this up as well, because when we hear the facts, the statistics about the number one risk factor for poor outcomes from issues like COVID, right? And we'll put a study up for everybody to see. This was an analysis that included hundreds of thousands of patients from hundreds of US hospitals. Obesity was the number one risk factor for poor outcomes, for hospitalization, for death. But nobody's asking or answering the question, why? What is it about this excess body fat? Unfortunately, this gets into a place where we might swing to another perspective of this being a superficial issue. Oh no, so it's like, it's being obese, it's your fault. It's not about that. It's about understanding our own bodies and our own biochemistry and how we might be subject to poor outcomes, not just from COVID, but from, all manner of chronic diseases as well, and different infectious diseases. And it really has to do with what's making up our cells, what's making up those fat cells, creating more oxidation where we don't have a reaction, we have an overreaction, right? So we're just talking about health and safety of our own bodies and being able to be in a state where we feel empowered and more resilient, right? And so You're answering that question for us.
One thing I want to bring up while we're on the topic of like body image and all this is that the idea that if we have a normal weight that we're metabolically healthy, and no one's paying attention to what is our body fat chemically made of. And what I'm saying and what I've discovered is that people who are normal weights are not metabolically healthy. And, I first learned this when I was working with the Lakers. I mean, I kind of sensed it before, but it became so starkly obvious because the Lakers, their body composition, their body fat is like 8%, 10%. And I was looking at their lab results and I was seeing that these guys are pre-diabetic. That, and nobody had told them this. They had severe insulin resistance. They had inflamed livers. And one of them that I was working with had complications of diabetes that was undiagnosed. And he didn't even have true diabetes. He only had pre-diabetes. But he was getting nerve damage, the kind of nerve damage that diabetics get. And fortunately, it was all reversible. In fact, it reversed very quickly once we got the vegetable oils out of his diet and tuned up the rest of his diet. Got him on some much more nutritious food that you need when you're battling these oils in your body fat are foods that will help you fight oxidation. They're going to help your body rebuild its antioxidant enzymes and its own natural arsenal of oxidation fighting chemicals and compounds that your body naturally will make. You don't need to go out of your way to eat, blueberries or goji berries or any, unusual berry. It's just really a balanced diet that's going to enable your body to create the kind of antioxidants that protect you from all of these horrible bad health outcomes. And it doesn't matter your weight. Like if your weight is high, why is that higher risk? Well, because it does turn out that, you've been down this vicious cycle for longer, right? I said we could build inflammatory vegetable oils, make you build body fat that you can't burn. And as you go through that cycle more and more, and you have more weight on your body, you are also at the same time depleting your antioxidants further and further. And this is why we have obesity being associated with all these other diseases. But it's not the root cause, and weight loss itself will not help you. What will help you is getting your metabolism healthy by getting your body fat healthy and controlling oxidative stress in every cell in your body.
What's so incredible about this in your work with the Los Angeles Lakers, for example, is that that has trickled its way into so many other amazing sports teams and athletes that we all marvel at. And I hope everybody heard this, seeing people who are literally like, these are physical specimens on the outside, but understanding that this does not protect you from, like, what are you making your tissues out of? And seeing these apparently very fit people having inflamed livers and prediabetes, and really helping to reorient them and to get them healthier and to perform better. And I'm just going to share this really quickly. Your influence extended its way to, again, other teams and players. For instance, the Villanova Wildcats ditched seed oils in 2015, and just coincidentally, in 2016, won their first championship in 30 years. Then they won again 2 years later. It's just a coincidence, but just, you were asking the question, how can we ensure better performance, more longevity, faster recovery, better energy, and all these different things? And if you could, can you share a little bit about your experience working with the Los Angeles Lakers? Because there's an icon out there. All right. Number 8, number 24, Kobe Bryant, who fortunately, we've had his trainer on the show many times, good friend, Tim Grover. And there was a point in his career, and this seems to coincide with when you started working with them, where Kobe was always looking for bone broth at the different hotels to make sure that he had his bone broth handy for when he traveled for games as well. Did you have anything to do with that?
Kobe didn't know what bone broth was before I started working with the Lakers. And he was so excited to learn about it, because what I told him was that bone broth it's like a natural anti-inflammatory. And it's better, though, than ibuprofen, because ibuprofen doesn't hone right in on where the inflammation is in your joints. But the compounds in bone broth are somehow chemically attracted, it seems like, to injured joints. And we know this from a study that I cite in one of my other books on they radio labeled some of the components in bone broth and fed them to little mice with injured joints. And they saw the radiation just honing in on the injured little kneecaps that they did to the poor mice. So anyway, I think I maybe even told that story to Kobe, because he was hugely intellectual. He wanted to know the science behind stuff. And he also just wanted to try new things and see if they worked. And he went insane once he started learning about the bone broth, because first of all, it tasted good, right? He loved the chicken soups and the other soups that the hotels were making specifically for the Lakers, because I would call them, get on the phone ahead and speak with the head chef. Boy, are they hard to track down, let me tell you. And say, we got to have these for the players because they're going to want them after the game. And so they always had them while I was working with them. And there was one point where Kobe sprained his ankle, was very depressed and down about it. And he said, this is like the second worst sprain I ever had in my life. He Jalen Rosed me. He showed a picture of his hugely swollen ankle. And the trainers were saying, oh, he's going to have to be out maybe for, like as long as he was before, which was something like 10, 11 weeks. But he wasn't even out 2 weeks, because what we did is I called up the hotel. I called up his personal assistant and I said, let's get Kobe 2 bowls of bone broth. Okay. After the game, I know it's late. You're probably maybe not even super hungry, but please. And then just keep eating that much until your ankle is better. And he got better in less than 2 weeks and he was playing again.
Amazing. That's such a great story. Oh, I love that so much. You are amazing. All right. Just your influence. And again, you're putting all this information together for all of us. And this is really the definitive guide on this subject matter when it comes to these vegetable oils integrating itself into our culture. And also, what are some of the things that we can do to reverse this issue and to get ourselves healthier and stronger and more resilient? So I want to talk to you about, we've said this word already, and it's a part of our culture and health lexicon, but antioxidants. Can we talk about specifically, how do antioxidants actually protect ourselves from oxidation? And can you share some of the insights? Because this is not about taking a bunch of supercharged antioxidant supplements to be able to garner these benefits. And most importantly, if we're not removing the cause of us needing more antioxidants, we're going to be missing the point.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key thing. You got to stop eating the vegetable oils. And I like to tell people that, if you can get in that with the one habit that's going to change your life more than anything else, is just picking up whatever packages you have, turning them around, reading the labels, and scanning for the hateful eight. If you can turn the package around, you can turn your metabolism around. And it's really true. You got to get those out of your diet. So turning back to antioxidants now, what does an antioxidant do? Well, what it does is it chemically traps a free radical. And each type of free radical that can form in our body has a different energy level. This has to do like with spin states. And it's really, now we're touching on complex chemistry that is like quantum physics almost. And I would not have known any of this had I not gone to Cornell and studied biochemistry. So don't feel bad if you haven't heard of this stuff before. So antioxidants, they catch those free radicals that are flying around. It's like the guy in the Matrix that can catch bullets. Like that's what antioxidants need to do. But unlike the guy in the Matrix, they can't do it all by themselves. They need a team. And so here's where we have another analogy. Like the energy level of these things is so high that one antioxidant can take it down just a little bit, but then it has to pass it off like a hot potato. That's the analogy. So antioxidants work in teams like a group of people playing hot potato. It's not just one that you need. And it's also not what vegetables need or what blueberries need or the antioxidants that are in like any whatever supplement that generally come from plants. Our bodies need to manufacture these different types of antioxidants. And the most powerful ones, the most powerful antioxidants are actually not chemicals, but little biological machines made out of protein called enzymes. And they're called antioxidant enzymes. And the antioxidant enzymes are the fastest enzymes, the fastest biological machines that we know of. That's how important they are. And our cells need to be stuffed with these enzymes in every nook and cranny. And no matter how many goji berries or resveratrol compounds or other encapsulated antioxidant supplements we eat, that will not help our body stuff its cells with these enzymes because they have to be made from protein and they have to be made from scratch in our bodies. We can't eat enzymes either. They're just proteins. To our digestive system, they would be broken down. So this is like the difference between food and us, right? We cannot eat an eyeball and have, a better eyeball, right? It's just, that just doesn't happen. But somehow with antioxidant enzymes, people think that we can eat the enzymes and it'll somehow help us, or that we can eat antioxidant compounds and it will somehow help us, but it doesn't do that. And so in order to fight oxidation and oxidative stress, we certainly need plenty of healthy whole food proteins. We also need plenty of vitamins and minerals and a wide variety of other compounds like choline and lecithin and all the stuff that you're going to get from a healthy whole food balanced diet. You do have to kind of make sure you get enough protein. A lot of women don't. So I teach you how to figure out all of this in the back of the book. So the last third of the book is devoted to walking you through step by step everything you need to know in order to balance out your diet and replete your cells with those life-saving antioxidant enzymes and all the vitamins and minerals that they need in order to do the job for you. And so it's step-by-step walking you through it. And there's also even like a 2-week, a bunch of very simple recipes that you can use to take what I call the 2-week challenge. Because I think after 2 weeks of taking on the challenge of totally eliminating these oils from your diet, including restaurants and processed foods that you might buy, totally eliminating it by becoming food self-sufficient, making your own healthy fast food, that you will feel so much better just after 2 weeks. You're going to want to continue it for longer.
I love that. I love that. And, just to reiterate this point, you mentioned how these antioxidants work as teams, and you did share some of this breakdown in the book, which was so fascinating, how vitamin E can grab that oxidative event, then it passes to vitamin C, then it passes to something like glutathione. It's this hot potato analogy. And the potato's getting cooler and cooler along the way, right? But of course, these things have to be available to our tissues. And also, most importantly, as you just shared, it's not a direct one-to-one that we're getting some of these things from food. We need to be able to provide our bodies with the elements to build certain things, to do certain things that are beyond like, hey, let me get this antioxidant supplement, right? We need to make sure that our bodies have adequate amounts of protein. And you just mentioned this, this is a big issue in our society overall, but in particular for women. We have to understand this, which again, I paid for a college education and I was not told this blatantly. If we're talking about hormones, we're talking about proteins. If we're talking about enzymes, we're talking about proteins. Our neurotransmitters, these things are all built with proteins. And fats, of course, are involved in a lot of these things too. And so if we're not providing our bodies with these raw materials to build these things in the first place, we're really missing the point. And so, again, all of this is contained in dark calories. And just before I let you go, though, I know folks are just like, well, what do I start cooking with today? All right. I understand finally that these so-called vegetable oils, which are not made of vegetables, are causing harm to my health and my family's health. I'm going to get these out of my kitchen. No more canola oil is setting foot in this place. What should I use instead, Dr. Cate?
Well, my favorite is butter. I also use olive oil, peanut oil, sesame oil, and coconut oil. Those are my favorite 5. There's a bunch of others that, I list in the book that are also good. Basically, anything that's not refined, is going to be good. But it's hard. The thing is, it's hard to know if something's been refined. The hateful 8 always have been refined when you see them on a label. Just for an example of how you can really double up on your benefits here, if you steam, say, broccoli or any vegetable, whatever your favorite vegetable, carrots, maybe steam your favorite vegetable, and then you melt plenty of butter, and you throw some fresh cut garlic in that butter as it's melting. It's going to become nice and aromatic. You pour that garlic butter over steamed broccoli or whatever steamed vegetables you have, sprinkle on some salt. It's good. If you're a fan of garlic bread, this is like, it kind of hits that spot, except it's not full of empty, starchy calories. It's full of antioxidants and vitamins.
Ooh, I love this. I didn't know he was going to get like seductive with the food imagery. All right. Now, also, again, what you just mentioned with these different cooking fats, these have been, funny enough, utilized for centuries, if not thousands of years, all of them. And we're just really returning to what humans have found. And here's the key. It takes minimal processing to get these oils. When you mentioned olive oil earlier, and I'm just like, again, we don't realize olives are a fruit, right? So it's usually, cold pressed, and it's just a very simple process versus the process that takes place when creating canola oil. And we'll put up some B-roll, as a matter of fact, of canola oil getting made, just so you could see this horror movie, all right? Get a glimpse at it. It's crazy. That much refining and the deodorizers and, the cleaning agents and all this stuff added to make this, quote, suitable for consumption, and the damage that it's doing. And as you shared so bluntly in the book, it's not necessarily, again, about these polyunsaturated fats or these seeds in of themselves. It's this oxidation. And the process of creating these oils creates inflammation in a bottle, creates oxidative stress in a bottle. And Dark Calories is highlighting that for all of us. Can you let everybody know where they can pick up a copy of Dark Calories?
Yeah, you can pick it up probably just at your favorite bookseller, whether it's Amazon or Barnes & Noble or Google Reads. They sell books. But why don't you visit my website? Please come to my website, which is drcate.com, drcate.com. There's a big banner up there that tells you all the different places you can buy Dark Calories, tells you a little bit more about it as well. And while you're there, scroll down to the bottom and sign up for my free newsletter. It comes out maybe once a month after the initial get to know you series of emails. So I don't flood your inbox. It's just so that you can stay up to date if I do any new cool projects.
Awesome. And truly, your site has some of the very best scientific data. And again, you just lay it out for us. It's a great resource for myself as well as a scientist, just to be able to like, what does Dr. Cate have to say on this? And so again, you're one of my favorite people in this space, and I'm so happy to talk to you. And I'm very proud to say that, you know, a book like this exists, and I can just direct friends and colleagues and family members to a resource like this to get educated on the subject matter, because unfortunately there is a recent campaign to reframe things to say, hey, these are innocuous oils, these don't really cause harm like that. That's not really true. No, you have the data, and we have to make a choice right now, and we're voting with our dollars and investing in our health with the oils that we're using in the preparation of our foods. And we can make a huge difference in our health moving forward. But as you shared too, this takes time. This takes time. But the changes start to happen immediately as soon as we make the switch. So again, I appreciate you so much for coming to hang out with us and sharing your brilliance.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, Shawn. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Dr. Cate Shanahan, everybody. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here.
How the hell is a keto diet helping some of my patients with schizophrenia or bipolar? Like, how the hell is that happening?